Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a good friend, a well-known journalist, an author, an economic analyst from New Delhi, India, coming to our show for a second time, Mr. Pranjal Sharma. Pranjal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's great to be back.
Thank you. Pranjal is an economic analyst, he's an advisor and an author. His new book is titled The Next New, Navigating the Fifth Industrial Revolution. And today we're going to focus entirely on his new book. So Pranjal, let's go straight into your book. What was the inspiration to write The Next New, Navigating the Fifth Industrial Revolution?
Thanks, Ashutosh. I have published a few books previously,
Yeah.
and I had looked at how the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution were making a big impact on economies like India.
Mm,
And I thought that was quite fascinating because in this era, we see a huge democratization of technology.
mm,
Today's technologies are far more egalitarian than they used to be. If you remember in the 70s and 80s, it was only about technology transfer from the legacy economies to the growth economies.
correct.
Today, I think we are in a situation where technology is accessible. If you look at artificial intelligence and such, I think it may not still be an equal world, but it's far more equal than it used to be a few decades ago. And
Mm,
and therefore, technologies are being used by various economies to solve their own challenges while making the most of innovation, not just globally, but also within their own country.
mm,
Now, the fourth industrial revolution is not really over. The connected technologies are still there, but one of the elements which happened or was neglected in the previous industrial revolutions was the impact on sustainability, sustainable practices, on climate,
mm,
and also on society. So, what we see today as the beginning of the fifth industrial revolution is guardrails coming around the existing business models, which means
mm,
that the technologies which are moving very rapidly are still going to have an important impact, but there is also the other two forces which are playing out and asserting themselves, and these are the needs for sustainable behavior, and also to ensure that in this era where nearly everything is digital, nearly every activity of an individual or an institution leaves a digital trail.
mm,
How do you ensure that people and individuals are not harmed? So,
mm,
societal impact of what is happening is equally important today. So,
mm.
if you put these three forces together, technology, sustainability, and social impact, these three together are creating a $25 trillion B2B business model, creative destruction, and that is impacting every company, every industry in nearly every economy.
Well said. Well said. My next question is that, you talk about the fifth industrial revolution. How do you define the fifth industrial revolution, and what are some of the key driving forces behind this transition?
Well, the questions now are that yes, we appreciate that technology is very important. And, we see that every passing month there is a new development. And those developments are not just theoretical developments, they are getting applied into areas which impact our daily lives, whether professional lives or personal lives.
Mm,
So there is a lot of excitement about it, but there is also a lot of anxiety. There are a lot of mouth-watering possibilities, but
mm,
also, as can be said, eye-watering risks that we
correct.
see.
Correct.
So the issues today is that how do you use technology in the most targeted way with the best controls possible?
Mm,
So the era of fifth industrial revolution is use technology, but do it in a way that it benefits society,
mm,
and it does not harm the society. And in the society, I mean both civil society, government, businesses, because you've seen that if not handled properly, technologies have led to serious crisis for companies as well.
Mm,
So the forces today are, yes, we need technology, but how do you harness it? How do you contain it?
mm,
How do you channelize it? If it's often I compare this to the discovery of electricity and fire.
right.
If you contain it well, it can light up your homes and your offices, but if you don't contain it well, it can literally burn them down. So
Mm,
we are at that stage, and this fifth industrial revolution is so critical because this is the stage where technology needs to be harnessed, contained, and given direction. Otherwise, we will actually be the poorer for it.
well said. Can you also talk about the concept of creative destruction that you talk about, and how is it relevant in the fifth industrial revolution?
Well, existing business models, as you know, have often been a transactional business model in many sectors. I'm not going to make a sweeping statement here, but typically, when you buy a product and that's the end of it, right? Let's say even a mobile phone, if you buy it, it is once it's bought by the consumer, it is the consumer's responsibility,
Mm,
and the organization that has made it and sold it literally says, look, it's up to you. But now, when we place the forces of sustainability and climate change and pollution, then the onus comes back to the producer. So the producer has to be told that you are equally responsible for end of use cycle for that product. You have to take the steps at the design stage to make sure that once the product is discarded, it can be reused or reapplied, so that the electronic waste, for example, that is minimized to the extent possible.
mm,
So this is one example where the business model then for the company has to go from just selling and washing its hands off to tracking its use
mm.
and making sure that at the end of the cycle it is also doing something to pick it up. Now, I'm not saying it's widespread, but
Right.
this is the pressure on companies across the electronic device industry
Mm,
to focus on what happens.
mm,
Another example, Ashutosh, is that if you look at concepts of products as a service,
mm.
there are several very obvious examples, but you will notice that today uh, people prefer to enjoy the experience but not necessarily own the product. Now,
Correct.
there are several categories of this, and mobility is a very good example. Both of us are from a different generation, but if
Mm,
you look at the younger generations, they don't feel that ownership of a vehicle is a priority for them. As long as there is a vehicle for them to help them move from point A to point B, they're happy with
yeah.
that. Furniture, for example, is a service. It's no longer what we had gone through in our lives,
Mm,
where you want to acquire and keep. So acquisition as a business model has moved to use as a business model.
mm.
So that is a creative destruction where you move from the product to the usage and the service.
Very interesting. And thank you for both these amazing examples. Transportation, of course, as you said very rightly, is Uber and how it's taken off with the young. But moving on, Pranjal, how is Industry 4.0 paving the way for smart manufacture? And what, in your view, does the future hold?
Well, there are several concepts on smart manufacturing. Automation is there. What is fascinating today is that automation is not just physical automation, where a human would, press a button and a robot will do the manufacturing. But you also have a layer of software which is coming on top of it. I'm not an engineer. I'm
Mm,
an economist by training and education. But what is fascinating today is to see how there is a very interesting melding of software and hardware inside the manufacturing space.
mm,
Concepts of digital twin have become very, very important in this. So, if an organization is imagining or planning a new factory, from the point of design, to its conclusion, they create a digital twin to anticipate and plan every single inch of the factory, which can improve the usage of space, which can impact the efficiency in energy usage. So, smart manufacturing is not just manufacturing, but it's a complete end-to-end design process
Mm,
which ensures that manufacturing is most efficient. And again, here issues of sustainability come in. How do you minimize heat? How do you minimize energy usage? How do you reduce heat, or how do you capture the heat which is generated? So several experiments or several models are in play across the world, across various technology companies. Very interesting partnerships are coming up. There are concepts of digital transformation for sustainability. There is a concept of industrial metaverse. So I see that we are in this middle of change right now, which is moving at a pace that I think sometimes is difficult to fathom for all of
mm,
us.
Well said. But given all the changes that are happening, what are, in your view, are some of the potential risks associated with technological advancements, and how can these be mitigated?
The risks are, I would say there are two or three risks. One, of course, is the impact on employment.
Mm,
And as you have more and more technology coming in, a
mm,
lot of the work or the jobs that were there are being destroyed because you don't really need them, and it's something that you see from the creative industries to manufacturing industries. It's a wide range. Nearly in every industry
mm,
is impacted. So the question is that if those jobs are disappearing, how do you prepare people and across age groups and demographics
mm,
to a new world where new skilling is required? I mean, this is again not a new debate, but I think this remains a continuing challenge for everybody, and which is where I think industry, government, and society have to come together.
mm,
Second is, I would say that the whole focus on digitization and AI-led transformation has another angle to it. We feel that, well, how do I use IoT, for example, or I use sensors to track the electricity usage in my office or factory? How do I get the right analysis, and how
mm,
do I reduce the usage of energy, which is a
mm,
very, very important piece. But what we do not assess often is that there is a cost of using AI and Gen AI
mm,
for electricity as well.
mm,
So we still don't have an answer that if I digitize constantly, whatever I'm doing, I'm really increasing my dependence on servers and networks. Each of those servers and networks need to be fueled by energy, they need to be
mm,
kept cool. So
mm,
the energy cost of digitization is often not being factored into what we are doing. So the net impact, is it going to be better or not? I don't think anybody has an answer yet. So we are into area and a frontier which really doesn't have clear solutions. Electric vehicles are also another example for it, where for a while everybody thought that electric vehicles are the great solution to fossil fuel led emissions and pollution. But if you look at the cost of creating and manufacturing a battery, if you look at the combining the important chemicals and the minerals required for the battery, if
mm,
you look at what happens to the battery after it is spent,
mm,
how do you dispose it of? The net impact of using an electric vehicle versus a internal combustion engine vehicle is difficult to calculate at this stage.
correct.
And we see some of this happening, Ashutosh, because if you remember, I mean, 40 to 50 years ago, there was this huge effort on windmills.
Mm,
Windmills came up, and solar farms and wind farms came up in many parts of the world.
mm,
Now, as those windmills are reaching the end of their product cycle, usage
mm,
cycle, people don't know what to do with these giant fans
Correct.
because they are not biodegradable. Some of them are being repurposed into tables and chairs, but how much can you do that? So
Correct.
the question is that when you say what are the risks, I think the risks of technology are also that sometimes we don't think through where it's going to land.
Mm.
But of course, that shouldn't stop us from innovating, but being aware and being uh, very cognizant of the fact that everything is not as cut and dried as we assume it to be.
Well said. Great response. The other aspect, Pranjal, I wanted to get your perspective was on cybersecurity. With such a huge amount of reliance on technology and, Web 3.0 and whatever else, how is cybersecurity becoming a critical focus for businesses in the fifth industrial revolution?
It's not just for businesses, Ashutosh. It's for everybody. It's for
Everyone,
all of
absolutely.
us.
Yeah.
If you look at a growth economy like India,
Mm,
we see that the number of people who are joining the digital mainstream is phenomenal. We're talking
mm,
about hundreds of millions, and this is unprecedented in the world's economic history. No other
correct.
country has digitized at this scale and pace in any time during our history.
Mm,
The legacy economies of Europe and North America uh, moved at a slower pace, and of course, their populations are lower. But what we see today is a digital footprint of every activity that we do.
mm,
With the mobile phone penetration that we have in India, with the digital interfaces that we have for nearly every consumer and citizen activity, the data being generated is one part of it, but the security of it is absolutely critical. I think that we are still lagging behind. Again, the pace of change has been so high that security has got attention, but perhaps far more needs to be done. But I think the what I think and feel very positive about is that this is one area that nobody is neglecting, and everybody is very, very aware of the fact that security in the digital world has to be paramount. I feel that more effort will be required, and perhaps technology can solve the challenges of security itself in the fourth and fifth industrial revolution.
mm. Well said. Well said. You also talk about specific businesses. For example, you speak about aerospace, you speak about defense sectors. What are some of the potential disruptions you see in these massive businesses?
Well, I think aviation is very interesting because you see two or three developments happening here. One, that we could move from fossil fuels to sustainable fuels,
Mm,
which have their origin in biomatters. So that's one big shift which is being experimented on. Second one is of electric planes. Again, battery fueled planes are coming through. Third is autonomous flying. So
mm,
a lot of autonomous flying projects have been experimented upon. There are concepts of electric vertical takeoff and lift vehicles, which are basically large drones
mm,
which can seat passengers as well. Then there is a lot of effort happening on material science, which is about lightweighting. A lot of companies and traditional companies in the steel sector are now pivoting to focusing on new composite materials, which will make in aviation in the aviation sector to make the planes and anything which is airborne to be lighter. And the lighter
mm,
it is, of course, the lower the reliance on energy. So
mm.
many interesting things are happening both for civil as well as defense applications.
Well said. The other factor that you talk about is farming, and there's reference to vertical farming, tech-enhanced smart kitchens. In a country where more than half our population is engaged in agriculture, what impact do you see of this technological innovation?
Well, agriculture is a huge sector in India. I think technology is making an impact. We haven't reached the stage where we can say entire agri sector has
Mm,
benefited. Some of the issues of vertical farming, etc., could be good for some cash crops, fruits and vegetables
mm,
in smaller scale. But at the larger scale, I think we still have a lot of challenges in agriculture. Some very good effect, changes have come through. So the combination of satellite imagery and soil sensors are giving far better information to farmers. Agri-tech is one of the sectors which did not see the funding winter that we talked about in the
mm,
previous few months.
mm,
The investments kept coming in. There is a lot of innovation happening. Interestingly, some pilot projects where some ladies in rural areas have been trained to fly drones
mm,
have also come, and these are, both in collaboration with the private sector and state governments and the central government. So lots of new experiments are on, but again, I'm very confident and positive about the fact that there is now a very open embrace of technology in the agricultural sector. But
mm,
because it is so large, I don't know whether any one solution has been scaled, but I think that the general direction and pace of activity is very positive.
mm. Well said. Uh, we already spoken about mobility, and we also spoke about batteries. But I'd love to get your perspective on the significance of microgrids and secondary battery storage in the future energy landscape.
Well, smart grid as a concept is coming through, which is that you again use IoT, you use artificial intelligence, so that when electricity is from the generator to the consumer, it can be managed almost on a real-time basis. And what will happen in this situation is that the moment demand and supply fluctuate, the grid has the ability to divert it to wherever the demand is high and wherever the demand and take it away from where it's low.
Mm,
A lot of interesting ideas are emerging here as well. So, for example, there is a concept that all the electric vehicles have batteries, and those batteries store power. And in the case of a crisis, those batteries actually become the generator for power, and they can actually put the energy back into the grid. So
mm,
again, in this field, a lot of interesting changes are happening. So smart grid by itself also doesn't means that people will be able to use electricity and power irrespective of what the source is in a better and more efficient way. We still have some challenges, for example, in India, where there are concerns that the coal generators get some right of way when they have to generate power, but the renewable energy players feel that they should get it because their energy is likely to disappear if it's not used immediately.
mm,
So there are some of these issues also coming up, but I think the use of AI in managing electricity is going to enhance and deepen in the months to come.
Well said. So, Pranjal, I have time for two more questions. My next question is, what role does social inclusion play in the fifth industrial revolution, and why is it important?
So not just social inclusion, Ashutosh. I would say what is very critical is that social protection also happens.
Yeah.
We see, and this is not just about India, but in the digital communities which are being created,
Mm,
there are several vulnerable groups which are now part of the digital mainstream.
mm,
They all have a mobile device in their hand, and you see that, and these vulnerable communities could be very, very young children. I mean, I find it sometimes surprising to see 3-year-old and 4-year-olds with a mobile phone in their hands with the parents busy with something else. At the same time, you have the elderly who have to use mobile phones as well. Here, safety of these communities has become a priority for a lot of people. I think regulators, industry, and business leaders have to be very aware that as more and more of these devices are used by people,
mm,
how do you ensure that they are aware of the risks? I think not enough has been done. A lot
mm,
of efforts are there, but You remember there was a time when we would talk about digital literacy, and
Yeah.
at that time, digital literacy literally meant how to use the internet and how to
Correct.
use the keyboard. We
Correct.
moved so fast
Absolutely.
beyond that
Mm,
situation. Remember also, Ashutosh, this is the year when you will have Gen AI bots embedded in the mobile phones.
mm,
So those Gen AI bots and apps are going to be capturing everything about you.
mm.
They're also going to be giving you information from so many different sources. You can
Yeah.
ask nearly anything to the Gen AI app, and they will give you information. The question, therefore, but the questions around this are that what is the source of the information? How
Mm,
genuine is that? If somebody says, okay, give me a a path from point A to B, map a route for me,
mm,
and the Gen AI bot is picking up information which is dated or not accurate, or from a malign source, a person could be misled. So I think we are in this era where protecting the society,
mm,
educating the society, and making them aware of the risks of using mobile devices has become very paramount.
mm,
There are some initiatives. There are in many countries e-safety commissioners as a regulatory structure have come up, and their role and job is to ensure that the tech companies, the service providers are constantly taking efforts to protect people.
mm.
In some ways you have to protect people from themselves,
Correct.
because we don't know how to use it. It's like telling a child how to use the knife properly, otherwise the
Mm,
child will obviously hurt themselves. You have to tell a driver how to drive a car safely.
mm.
There is a process
Yeah.
of learning to drive a vehicle. Now similarly, we need some kind of a structure and a process to make people aware on how to use technology responsibly, not just for themselves, but for others as well. So I
Mm,
think we are again in that stage where technology is exploded, but the people who are holding the technology are not yet trained or perhaps experienced or are even aware of the power that is in their hands, and
mm.
therefore they need to be far more cautious and responsible. Some of us are, but I think at the rate at which it's growing,
Yeah,
we will probably need a mass movement for it.
that's it. And my last question for you, based on all the research that you've done in for your book and all the knowledge that you have, what advice would you give to young professionals entering the workforce in the era of the fifth industrial revolution?
I like the phrase, Ashutosh, of workforce, because my view is that I don't think employment as a concept or employment
Yeah.
by in the traditional way is going to increase in the next few years. It will at best stay where it is. There will be a huge transition from existing roles to new roles.
Yeah.
We don't know how that's going to play out yet. It's still a work in progress. So my suggestion and advice to professionals is that look for work opportunities. Keep yourself aware of what are the skills that are going to be needed.
Hmm.
Now, certain types of skills will be important. I think the important thing for people to also realize is that you cannot get a degree and hope to live off it for the rest of your life. There will be far shorter cycles of change,
Hmm.
and those who are able to surf these cycles of change will survive better.
Hmm.
It's difficult to again predict what's going to be popular and what will be the demand, but I think young professionals have to now be very clear that they will have to be ready to master more than one domain expertise.
Hmm.
They cannot say that I have a degree in finance and therefore I'm going to be only a finance professional. They may also have to have other skills in their hand, because you don't know at what point which skill is required or what combination of skill is required. It's possible that data science and finance together is going to be in demand, but one by itself may not be in demand. So I think that ability and openness to adopt and adapt will be most relevant for the moment.
Hmm. Well said. On that note, Pranjal, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me. We covered an amazing amount of ground about the fifth industrial revolution, what is the next new. I think I learned many new things from you based on all the research that you've done for your book. Before I end, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mr. Pranjal Sharma's book, Next New Navigating the Fifth Industrial Revolution. I have a copy and it's an amazing book you must get hold of. Thank you, Pranjal, for speaking to me and all the very best.
Thanks, Ashutosh. I want to just close on one line
Yeah.
which actually relates to your previous and last question. The next new is also important because companies and individuals have to realize that the next new for them or competition for their work could come from an area that they never anticipated. So, competition for a car company is coming from people who never had a history in automobile manufacturing. Competition for medical device industry is coming from the wearables who don't have a history in medical data. So, in this new era, please be aware that the next new for yourself could come from anywhere.
It would be completely new for everybody. Thank you, Pranjal.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.